Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to this budget live on YouTube. This is my first YouTube live stream, and I'm hoping the technology all works very well. I've got my stream deck down here so I can switch between various pages. And I just need to mute myself so I can't hear myself talking back. There we go. You live and you learn, don't you? I can hear myself coming back through my headphones, which was not a pleasant experience. I've got the budget about to start on my screen on the side over here. We're going to be watching it live together. We're going to be working out what's going on, what the main announcements are, things to look out for today. What's the state of the economy? How bad have things got? We're going to get the latest forecasts from the Independent Office for Budget Responsibility. We're going to hear about an extension to the furlough scheme, and so much of today's budget has been leaked already in the press, hasn't it? We already know so much has been leaked. So I'm keeping half an eye on this side so we don't miss when Chancellor Rishi Sunak gets to his feet in a second. We'll hopefully hear about some new grants for businesses which have been closed during the pandemic, during this latest national lockdown. And we'll also hear about how they're going to get them back on their feet, because it's not a simple case of just opening the doors and going back to normal. We're going to hear about the next round of funding for the Self-Employed Income Support Scheme, round 4. And again, lots of leaks about this in the press, but it does look like newer self-employed people are going to qualify for this next round of funding. But as things stand, it looks unlikely that company directors, so this huge group of people called the excluded, will qualify. Lots of support expected for the property market, and we know just how much the Conservative government loves the property market. So an extension to the stamp duty holiday, which is due to come to an end at the end of this month, probably through to the end of June or so, and also the introduction of a government guarantee to back low deposit mortgages. So trying to stimulate the mortgage market, bring back these 95% loan to value mortgages, and just prop up property prices. There's bound to be some unintended consequences from that. It's not necessarily a good thing. And then we've got to watch out for tax rises. I mean, in the main, it's probably too soon for tax rises. We're still in lockdown. After all, we know what the roadmap to recovery looks like, but we're still in this lockdown at the moment, and it probably is too soon. But do look out for a start with some tax rises. Keep an eye. Boris is still on his feet, so we don't have Chancellor Rishi Sunak in the seat yet. It may be a little bit after 12:30 because he's not, by the looks of it, appeared in the House of Commons yet. But I will keep an eye on this screen as we go. But yeah, watch out for tax rises. Corporation tax, I think, is going to be the first place this starts with. We're currently at a rate of 19%. There's been talk of it going all the way up over the next few years to 25% corporation tax. Now, corporation tax is an increase, whilst I pay corporation tax, my business pays corporation tax, it's never nice to pay, isn't probably the worst place to start for the Chancellor, simply because it's a tax on profits. So if companies have suffered and they've not been profitable during the pandemic, they're not going to care too much whether the rate of tax they pay on their profits is 19%, 25% or 50%, because they're not making profits yet. But in the future, obviously, a higher rate of corporation tax is not something to look forward to. There's also been lots of talk about reform to capital gains tax, CGT, and we've seen a big uptick in activity, people selling off taxable assets ahead of this budget, fearful that the rate of corporation tax will go up, and then possibly a reform to inheritance tax too. That's something that's been recommended by the Office for Tax Simplification. It's a messy tax at the moment. A relatively small number of households and families pay that tax anyway, but it's one that could be reformed, and we could see some higher taxes there. Especially look out today for stealth taxes. And what I mean by stealth taxes are frozen thresholds. I'm trying to get my tongue around that word. Frozen thresholds. So making sure that you're aware that if a threshold for income tax, for example, stays at its current level, but earnings go up typically each year, more people fall into the trap of a higher income rate tax. We may even see the same with the pension lifetime allowance being frozen for the rest of this parliament, and therefore more people having to pay an excess tax charge on the size of their pension funds. It's great to see everyone in the live chat. I will try and keep half an eye on this as I go, and I will be putting the budget, and just to check that works actually, and check my little sort of buttons and stuff here work, so I can switch between me, and there we go, that's live from the Houses of Parliament, and I can bring the volume in as well. So do it on that side, sorry. Bring the volume in as well.
Mr. Speaker,
there we go.
what prevents
I'll bring that back in just a second. But for now, we'll talk about what we're likely to see. I have to remember to mute that one as well because it's going to be very distracting if I've got that in my ear. There's so much going on. When I record these YouTube videos, it's fantastic because I have one camera and a ring light and I have my script in front of me and things, and that's all I have to worry about. And if I make a mistake, I pause for a few seconds and then start reading again, and I edit it all out, and it looks seamless, it looks perfect. Live stream is so different, isn't it? And this is why I've always been quite reluctant to do live radio interviews, for example. I've done plenty of pre-record stuff before for commercial radio and BBC, lots of appearances on BBC Radio for Moneybox, for example, but I think on Moneybox I've only been live once, and on LBC I think I've only been live 3 times. But I've been a pre-recorded guest probably hundreds of times across the different channels. It's a very different beast, but having to press the buttons, think about the different screens, think about you guys, the audience as well, is a bit of a challenge. I'll get there. Thank you for the comments. Great to see everyone here as well. And yeah, please do talk about what you think about the announcements that get made, whether any of these are particular shocks. I know we've got some fantastic expertise in here as well. Charlie, it's good to see you. Simon and the Game Geek, that's my nephew, who's challenged me to get to 2,000 subscribers by the end of Feb, which we did. So thank you very much, Barnaby, for that. We did that, and thank you, of course, everyone for subscribing too. Let's try and make this the best budget live stream on YouTube today, and you can help us by doing that. You can share the link to this, and of course you can hit the like button as well, and that all feeds the YouTube algorithm, helps more people to find it. If you're watching this as a replay, so if you're not watching me live at 12:30 on Wednesday lunchtime, you need to press subscribe, because subscribers got notified about this happening and they got to come in and do this live and be part of the community. Jaron, thank you very much. Thank you, Alan, that's great. So we now have a big clock on the screen over here, and I guess that means they're changing over personnel in the House of Commons, because of course they're still split in the House of Commons between people who are physically there and people who are on Zoom coming in remotely from home. But when they do change over, they have to follow these COVID rules and have a little gap for the changeover to do it in a safe way. I guess that's so they're not passing each other too closely in the lobbies and things. I've been to the House of Commons 3 or 4 times in the past, and it's an incredible place. I mean, it takes your breath away when you walk into the main entrance and things, and sort of see all the history around you. But I can imagine, as somebody working there, as a member of Parliament and as an official working there, it must be quite an experience on a daily basis. So we're going to watch this clock ticking for a while now, I guess, until Rishi Sunak comes in, and I'll move back to the live chat. What I need to do is, there we go, we've got some people now coming into the House of Commons. It looks like Rishi Sunak is at his desk. So as soon as that happens, I will pull up the volume on this as well, so you can hear him speaking. And actually, there's no volume coming from that feed, Parliament TV feed, just yet. It's going to be some incredible stuff going on in just a second. I think, as well as all the announcements that we've seen heavily leaked, heavily trailed, I suspect we're going to have a few surprises. It would be very unusual for the Chancellor not to have held a few announcements in reserve. An awful lot's been leaked. And actually, during Prime Minister's question time, the Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, had a bit of a snide remark to the government and said, I feel like I know what's in the budget already, because so much has been leaked. It used to be the case that budgets were kept secret, and we got to find out on the day all of it was a surprise. Now that's really not the case. Now you just have to pick up the newspaper from about a week or so ahead of it. I think in particular, people who are representing the self-employed and company directors have felt a little aggrieved by the leaks, because for months now, the government and Rishi Sunak has kept on saying, we're not going to announce anything until the budget about extra help for the excluded. And then the morning of, we get the announcement. So before the budget, we get the announcement. Yes, that's right. The budget is the one time in the House of Commons you're allowed to have an alcoholic beverage in front of you, and some chancellors take advantage of that. Rishi Sunak clearly doesn't. He's teetotal, I believe. But yeah, it's been a while. Right, we've got some volume. I'm going to move us over now. Here we go. Here's the budget.
Before I call the Chancellor of the Exchequer, I remind honourable members that copies of the budget resolutions will be available from the Vote Office in Members' Lobby upon the Chancellor's statement being finished, and of course online. I also remind honourable members that interventions are not taken during the Chancellor's statement, nor during the replies of either the Leader of the Opposition or the Leader of the Scottish National Party. I also just mentioned that British...
Charlie, that's naughty.
continue until the end of the speech of the leader of the Scottish National Party, and it's available to watch, quick advert here, on parliamentlive.tv. Mr. Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Madam Deputy Speaker, a year ago, in my first budget, I announced our initial response to coronavirus. What was originally thought to be a temporary disruption to our way of life has fundamentally altered it. People are still being told to stay in their homes. Businesses have been ordered to close. Thousands of people are in hospital. Much has changed, but one thing has stayed the same. I said I would do whatever it takes. I have done, and I will do so. We have announced over £280 billion of support, protecting jobs, keeping businesses afloat, helping families get by. Despite this unprecedented response, the damage coronavirus has done to our economy has been acute. Since March, over 700,000 people have lost their jobs. Our economy has shrunk by 10%, the largest fall in over 300 years. Our borrowing is the highest it has been outside of wartime. It's going to take this country and the whole world a long time to recover from this extraordinary economic situation. But we will recover. This budget meets the moment with a three-part plan to protect the jobs and livelihoods of the British people. First, we will continue doing whatever it takes to support the British people and businesses through this moment of crisis. Second, once we are on the way to recovery, we will need to begin fixing the public finances, and I want to be honest today about our plans to do that. And third, in today's budget, we begin the work of building our future economy. Madam Deputy Speaker, today's forecasts show that our response to coronavirus is working. The Prime Minister last week set out our cautious but irreversible roadmap to ease restrictions whilst protecting the British people. The NHS, deserving of immense praise, has had extraordinary success in vaccinating more than 20 million people across the United Kingdom. And combined with our economic response, one of the most comprehensive and generous in the world, this means the Office for Budget Responsibility are now forecasting, in their words, a swifter and more sustained recovery than they expected in November. The OBR now expect the economy to return to its pre-COVID level by the middle of next year, 6 months earlier than previously thought.
And just coming quickly then, they did of course originally think it would recover to its pre-COVID size by the end of this year, so it went back and now it's come forward a bit.
Higher. But while our prospects are now stronger, coronavirus has done and is still doing profound damage. And today's forecasts make clear repairing the long-term damage will take time. The OBR still expect that in 5 years' time, because of coronavirus, our economy will be 3% smaller than it would have been.
It's very hard to separate out the impacts of coronavirus on the economy size and the impacts of Brexit.
For their work. The OBR forecast that our economy will grow this year by 4%, by 7.3% in 2022, then 1.7, 1.6 and 1.7% in the last 3 years of the forecast. And the OBR have said that our interventions to support jobs have worked. In July last year, they expected unemployment to peak at 11.9%. Today, because of our interventions, they forecast a much lower peak, 6.5%. That means 1.8 million fewer people are expected to be out of work than previously thought. But every job lost is a tragedy, which is why protecting, creating, and supporting jobs remains my highest priority. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, let me turn straight away to the first part of this budget's plan, to protect the jobs and livelihoods of the British people through the remaining phase of this crisis. First, the furlough scheme will be extended until the end of September. For employees, there will be no change to the terms. They will continue to receive 80% of their salary for hours not worked until the scheme ends. As businesses reopen, we will ask them to contribute alongside the taxpayer to the cost of paying their employees. Nothing will change until July, when we will ask for a small contribution of just 10% and 20% in August and September.
Getting the leaks out the way first.
The government is proud of the furlough, one of the most generous schemes in the world, effectively protecting millions of people's jobs and incomes. Second, support for the self-employed will also continue until September, with a fourth grant covering the period February to April and a fifth and final grant from May onwards. The fourth grant will provide 3 months of support at 80% of average trading profits. For the fifth grant, people will continue to receive grants worth 3 months of average profits, with the system open for claims from late July. But as the economy reopens over the summer...
Sorry, that was a little bit vague on that one. I'm not sure the fifth round of self-employed income support scheme will be as generous.
So people whose turnover has fallen by 30% or more will continue to receive the full 80% grant. People whose turnover has fallen by less than 30% will therefore have less need of taxpayer support and will receive a 30% grant. And I can also announce a major improvement in access to the self-employed scheme. When the scheme was launched, the newly self-employed couldn't qualify because they hadn't all filed the 1920 tax return. But as the tax return deadline has now passed, I can announce today that provided they filed a tax return by midnight last night, over 600,000 more people, many of whom became self-employed last year, can now claim the fourth and fifth grants. Over the course of this crisis, we will have spent £33 billion supporting the self-employed, one of the most generous programmes for self-employed people anywhere in the world. Third, we're also extending our support for the lowest paid and most vulnerable. To support low-income households, the universal credit uplift of £20 a week will continue for a further 6 months, well beyond the end of this national lockdown. We'll provide working tax credit claimants with equivalent support for the next 6 months. And because of the way that system works operationally, we will need to do so with a one-off payment of £500. And over the course of this year, as the economy begins to recover, we are shifting our resources and focus towards getting people into decent, well-paid jobs.
Boris got a serious leg wobble going on there. That's what I do when I'm nervous.
Increasing the national living wage to £8.91 from April, an annual pay rise of almost £350 for someone working full-time on the national living wage. And my right honourable friends, the Education Secretary and the Work and Pension Secretary are taking action to give people the skills they need to get jobs or get better jobs. The Restart programme, supporting over 1 million long-term unemployed people. The number of work coaches doubled. The Kickstart scheme, funding high-quality jobs for over 250,000 young people. The Prime Minister's Lifetime Skills Guarantee, giving every adult the opportunity for a fully funded Level 3 qualification. And we want businesses to hire new apprentices, so we're paying them more to do it.
Got any body language experts in the chat? Because Boris's body language is fascinating, the movement of the thumbs as well as the leg wobbling.
New apprentice hires of any age, alongside investing £126 million of new money to triple the number of traineeships. We're taking what works to get people into jobs and making it better. Madam Deputy Speaker, one of the hidden tragedies of lockdown has been the increase in domestic abuse. So I'm announcing today an extra £19 million on top of the £125 million we announced at the spending review for domestic violence programmes to reduce the risk of reoffending and to pilot a network of respite rooms to provide specialist support for vulnerable homeless women. To recognise the sacrifices made by so many women and men in the armed forces community, I'm providing an additional £10 million to support veterans with mental health needs. And on current plans, the funding to support survivors of the thalidomide scandal runs out in 2023. They deserve better than to have constant uncertainty about the future costs of their care. So not only will I extend this funding with an initial down payment of around £40 million, I am today announcing a lifetime commitment guaranteeing funding forever. And let me thank the Thalidomide Trust and the Honourable Member for North Dorset for their leadership on this important issue. As well as supporting people's jobs, incomes, the lowest paid and most vulnerable, this budget also protects businesses. We've been providing businesses with direct cash grants through the recent restrictions. These grants come to an end in March. I can announce today that we will provide a new Restart grant in April to help businesses reopen and get going again. Non-essential retail businesses will open first, so they will receive grants of up to £6,000 per premises. Hospitality and leisure businesses, including personal care and gyms, will open later or be more impacted by restrictions when they do, so we'll give them grants of up to £18,000. That's £5 billion of new grants, on top of the £20 billion we've already provided, taking our direct total.
These new restart grants will depend on the rateable value of the property, so only the largest buildings, largest rateable values will get that full 18,000.
North for highlighting the particular needs of the personal care sector. And with my right honourable friend, the Culture Secretary, we're making available £700 million to support our incredible arts, culture and sporting institutions as they reopen. Backing the UK and Ireland's joint 2030 World Cup bid, launching a new approach to apprenticeships in the creative industries, and extending our £500 million film and TV production restart scheme. Even with the new restart grants, some businesses will also need loans to see them through. As the Bounce Back Loan and CBILS programs
there goes
come
that
to
leg
an end,
wobble again.
we're introducing a new recovery loan scheme to take their place. Businesses of any size can apply for loans from £25,000 up to £10 million through to the end of this year. And the government will provide a guarantee to lenders of 80%. Last year, we provided an unprecedented 100% business rates holiday in England for all eligible businesses in the retail, hospitality and leisure sectors, a tax cut worth £10 billion. This year, we'll continue with the 100% business rates holiday for the first 3 months of the year, in other words, through to the end of June. For the remaining 9 months of the year, business rates will still be discounted by 2/3, up to a value of £2 million for closed businesses, with a lower cap for those who have been able to stay open. A £6 billion tax cut for business. One of the hardest hit sectors has been hospitality and tourism. 150,000 businesses that employ over 2.4 million people need our support. To protect those jobs, I can confirm that the 5% reduced rate of VAT will be extended for 6 months to the 30th of September. And even then, we won't go straight back to the 20% rate. We'll have an interim rate of 12.5% for another 6 months, not returning to the standard rate until April of next year.
That's good news for the hospitality sector.
Cutting VAT next year by almost £5 billion. Madam Deputy Speaker, the housing sector supports over 500,000 jobs. The cut in stamp duty I announced last summer has helped hundreds of thousands of people buy a home and supported the economy at a critical time. But due to the sheer volume of transactions we're seeing, many new purchases won't complete in time for the end of March. So I can announce today the £500,000 nil rate ban will not end on the 31st of March, it will end on the 30th of June. Then, to smooth the transition back to normal, the nil rate band will be £250,000, double its standard level, until the end of September, and we will only return to the usual level of £125,000 from October the 1st. Even with the stamp duty cut, there is still a significant barrier to people getting on the housing ladder: the cost of a deposit. So I'm announcing today a new policy to stand behind home buyers.
Announcing today is a little disingenuous.
Lenders who provide mortgages to home buyers who can only afford a 5% deposit will benefit from a government guarantee on those mortgages. And I'm pleased to say that several of the country's largest lenders, including Lloyds, NatWest, Santander, Barclays and HSBC, will be offering these 95% mortgages from next month. And I know more, including Virgin Money, will follow shortly after. A policy that gives people who can't afford a big deposit the chance to buy their own home. As the Prime Minister has said, we want to turn generation rent into generation buy. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, the furlough extended to September. Self-employed grants extended to September. Universal credit uplift.
Brace for the sting in the tail. It's got to be coming any time now.
Violence, bigger incentives to hire apprentices, higher grants to struggling businesses, extra funds for culture, arts and sport, new loan schemes to finance businesses, kickstart, restart, a lifetime skills guarantee, business rates cut, VAT cut, stamp duty cut, and a new mortgage guarantee. The first part of a budget that protects the jobs and livelihoods of the British people. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, as you can see, we're going long, extending our support well beyond the end of the roadmap to accommodate even the most cautious view about the time it might take to exit the restrictions. Let me summarise for the House the scale of our total fiscal response to coronavirus. At this budget, we are announcing an additional £65 billion of measures over this year and next to support the economy in response to coronavirus. Taking into account the significant support announced at the spending review, this means our total COVID support package this year and next is £352 billion. And once you include the measures announced at spring budget last year, including the step change in capital investment, total fiscal support from this government over this year and next amounts to £407 billion. Coronavirus has caused one of the largest, most comprehensive and sustained economic shocks this country has ever faced. And by any objective analysis, this government has delivered one of the largest, most comprehensive and sustained responses this country has ever seen. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, We're using the full measure of our fiscal firepower to protect the jobs and livelihoods of the British people.
I just wanted to tear the plaster
the
off and
damage
tell us
done
about
by
the tax
coronavirus,
rises. Here we go, here we go.
combined with a level of support unimaginable only 12 months ago, has created huge challenges for our public finances. The OBR's fiscal forecasts show that this year we have borrowed a record amount, £355 billion. That's 17% of our national income, the highest level of borrowing since World War II. Next year, as we continue our unprecedented response to this crisis, borrowing is forecast to be £234 billion, 10.3% of GDP, an amount so large it has only one rival in recent history, this year. Without corrective action, borrowing would continue at very high levels, leaving underlying debt rising indefinitely. Instead, because of the steps I am taking today, borrowing falls to 4.5% of GDP in 22-23, 3.5% in 23-24, then 2.9 and 2.8% in the following 2 years.
This means big tax
And
rises
while
coming.
underlying debt rises from 88.8% of GDP this year to 93.8% next year, it then peaks at 97.1% in 23-24 before stabilising and falling slightly to 97% and 96.8% in the final 2 years of the forecast. Let me explain why this matters. The amount we've borrowed is comparable only with the amount we borrowed during the 2 world wars. It's going to be the work of many governments over many decades to pay it back. Just as it would be irresponsible to withdraw support too soon, it would also be irresponsible to allow our future borrowing and debt to rise unchecked. When crises come, we need to be able to act, and we need the fiscal freedom to act. A freedom that you only have if you start with public finances in a good and strong place. The only reason we have been able to respond as boldly as we have to COVID is because 10 years of Conservative governments painstakingly rebuilt our fiscal resilience. When the next crisis comes, we need to be able to act again. And while our borrowing costs are affordable right now, interest rates and inflation may not stay low forever, and just a 1 percentage point increase in both would now cost us over £25 billion. And as we
This is the fear, rising inflation, rising interest rates, and the impact that has on the cost of servicing government debt.
sharply. This budget is not the time to set detailed fiscal rules with precise targets and dates to achieve them by. I don't believe that would be sensible. But I do want to be honest about what I mean by sustainable public finances and how I plan to achieve them. Our fiscal decisions are guided by 3 principles. First, while it is right to help people and businesses through an acute crisis like this one, in normal times, the state should not be borrowing to pay for everyday public spending. Second,
Austerity.
over the medium term, we cannot allow our debt to keep rising. And given how high our debt now is, we need to pay close attention to its affordability. And third, it is sensible to take advantage of lower interest rates to invest in capital projects that can drive our future growth. So the question is, how we achieve that, how we balance the extraordinary support we are providing to the economy right now with the need to begin the work of fixing our public finances. I have and always will be honest with the country about the challenges we face. So I'm announcing today 2 measures to begin that work. Let me take each in turn.
Corporation tax is one.
Madam
I'm not sure what the other
Deputy
one's going to
Speaker,
be.
our response to coronavirus has been fair, with the poorest households benefiting the most from our interventions. And our approach to fixing the public finances will be fair too, asking more of those people and businesses who can afford to contribute and protecting those who cannot. So this government is not going to raise the rates of income tax, national insurance or VAT. Instead, our first step is to freeze personal tax thresholds.
Stealth tax.
We've nearly doubled the income tax personal allowance over the last decade, making it the most generous of any G20 country. We will, of course, deliver our promise to increase it again next year to £12,570, but we will then keep it at this more generous level until April 2026. The higher rate threshold will similarly be increased next year to £50,000 270, and will then also remain at that level for the same period.
Which means more people will fall
Nobody's
into that threshold
take-home
and pay tax
will
over
be
time.
less than it is now as a result of this policy. But I want to be clear with all members that this policy does remove the incremental benefit created had thresholds continued to increase with inflation. We are not hiding it. I am here explaining it to the House, and it is in the budget document in black and white. It is a tax policy that is progressive and fair.
Yet the man on the street won't
And I will also
understand they're paying
maintain
higher
at
tax
their
as a result of
current
those
levels
thresholds being
until
frozen.
April 2026, the inheritance tax thresholds, the pensions lifetime allowance, the annual exempt amount in capital gains tax, and for 2 years from April 2022, the VAT registration threshold, which at £85,000 will remain more than twice as generous as the EU and OECD averages.
Huge,
We'll also
huge stealth
tackle
taxes,
fraud
these
in our
ones.
COVID schemes with £100 million to set up a new HMRC task force of around 1,000 investigators, as well as new measures and new investment in HMRC to clamp down on tax avoidance and evasion. The full details are set out in the Red Book. Madam Deputy Speaker, the government is providing businesses with over £100 billion of support to get through this pandemic. So it is fair and necessary to ask them to contribute to our recovery. So the second step I am taking today is that in 2023, the rate of corporation tax paid on company profits will increase to 25%. Even after this change, the United Kingdom will still have the lowest corporation tax rate in the G7, lower than the United States, Canada, Italy, Japan, Germany, and France. We're also introducing some crucial protections. First, this new higher rate won't take effect until April 2023, well after the point when the OBR expect the economy to have recovered. And even then, because corporation tax is only charged on company profits, any struggling business will, by definition, be unaffected. Second, I'm protecting small businesses with profits of £50,000 or less by creating a small profits rate, maintained at the current rate of 19%. This means around 70% of companies, 1.4 million businesses, will be completely unaffected. And third, we will introduce a taper above 50,000 so that only businesses with profits of £250,000 or greater will be taxed at the full 25% rate.
Great news for accountants,
That
this one.
means only 10% of companies will pay the full higher rate. So yes, it's a tax rise on company profits, but only on the larger, more profitable companies, and only in 2 years' time. And I wanted to announce this now because I think for business, certainty matters.
That's a loss of notice for a tax rise like that.
For the next 2 years, I'm also making the tax treatment of losses significantly more generous by allowing businesses to carry back losses of up to £2 million for 3 years, providing a significant cash flow benefit. This means companies can now claim additional tax refunds of up to £760,000. And because of the current 8% bank surcharge, the implied overall tax rate for banks would be too high. So we will review the surcharge to make sure the combined rate of tax on the UK banking sector doesn't increase significantly from its current level, and to make sure this important industry remains internationally competitive. Madam Deputy Speaker, these are significant decisions to have taken. Decisions no Chancellor wants to make.
We're going to get Steve Jobs just one
I
more thing.
recognise they might not be popular, but they are honest. And let's consider the alternatives. The first is to do nothing, to leave our deficit problem untreated, our debt problem for someone else in the future to deal with. That has never been the way of a Conservative government, and nor do I believe it can be the way of a responsible Chancellor. Another alternative would be to try and find all the savings we need from public spending. But when we said at the last election that we were the party of public services, people believed us, and they were right to believe us. And when we said we'd be the party that invests in new infrastructure, they were right to believe that too. The only other alternative would be to increase the rates of tax on working people. But I don't believe that would be right either. So I believe our approach, while bold, is compatible with our duty as a fiscally responsible and business-friendly government. This is the right choice, and I am confident it will command public assent. I have one final announcement on business tax.
Steve Jobs moment.
With the lowest corporation tax in the G7 and a new small profits rate, the UK will have a pro-business tax regime. But we need to do even more to encourage businesses to invest right now. Business investment creates jobs, lifts growth, spurs innovation and drives productivity. For decades, we've lagged behind our international peers. Right now, while many businesses are struggling, others have been able to build up significant cash reserves. We need to unlock that investment. We need an investment-led recovery. So today, I can announce the super deduction. For the next 2 years, when companies invest, they can reduce their tax bill, not just by a proportion of the cost of that investment as they do now, or even by 100% of their cost, the so-called full expensing that some have called for. With the super deduction, they can now reduce their tax bill by 130% of the cost. Let me give the House an example. Under the existing rules, a construction firm buying £10 million of new equipment could reduce their taxable income in the year they invest by just £2.6 million.
Starting to wish I'd
With the
waited to
super
buy my
deduction,
Tesla.
They can now
Would have been a good
reduce
one
it
for a
by
deduction from corporation tax.
£13 million. We've never tried this before in our country. The OBR have said it will boost business investment by 10%, around £20 billion more per year. It makes our tax regime for business investment truly world-leading, lifting us from 30th in the OECD to 1st. And worth £25 billion during the 2 years it is in place, this will be the biggest business tax cut in modern British history. Bold, unprecedented action to get companies investing, creating jobs and driving our economic recovery. Madam Deputy Speaker, let me now turn to duties. This is a tough time for hospitality, so I can confirm that the planned increases in duties for spirits like Scotch whisky, wine, cider and beer will all be cancelled. All alcohol duties frozen for the second year in a row, only the third time in 2 decades. And right now, to keep the cost of living low, I'm not prepared to increase the cost of a tank of fuel. So
that one's at odds, of course, with the green agenda that they're talking about, so there has to be some balance somewhere on that one.
Madam Deputy Speaker, this budget protects the jobs and livelihoods of the British people. This budget is honest about the challenges facing our public finances and how we will begin to fix them. And this budget does one other thing. It lays the foundations of our future economy, the third part of our plan. If we want a better future economy, we have to make it happen. We have to do things that have never been done before. The world is not going to be any less competitive after coronavirus. So it's not enough to have some general desire to grow the economy. We need a real commitment to green growth. It's not enough to have some general desire to increase productivity. We need a real commitment to give every business, large or small, the opportunity to grow, innovate and succeed. It's not enough to have a general desire to create jobs. We need a real commitment to create jobs where people are and change the economic geography of this country. And we can't strengthen our domestic economy without remaining a global, outward-looking nation. This future economy won't be created in any one budget, but today we lay the foundations. Madam Deputy Speaker, our future economy needs investment in green industries across the United Kingdom. So I can announce today the first ever UK infrastructure bank. Located in Leeds, the bank will invest across the UK in public and private projects to finance the green industrial revolution. Beginning this spring, it will have an initial capitalisation of £12 billion, and we expect it to support at least £40 billion of total investment in infrastructure. And I know my right honourable friend, the member for Pudsey, will particularly welcome the location of this new institution. Offshore wind is an innovative industry where the UK already has a global competitive advantage. So we're funding new port infrastructure to build the next generation of offshore wind projects in Teesside and Humberside. And in November, I announced we would launch a world-leading sovereign green bond. Today, we're going further, announcing a new retail savings product to give all UK savers the chance to support green projects, as my right honourable friend, the member for North East Bedfordshire, has campaigned for. We've also asked Enquiries to establish a new group to position the city as the global leader for voluntary, high-quality carbon offset markets, and underpinning all of this will be an updated monetary policy remit for the Bank of England. It reaffirms their 2% target, but now it will also reflect the importance of environmental sustainability and the transition to net zero. Madam Deputy Speaker, our future economy will also address our productivity problem and support small business. Too often, smaller firms don't have the time or resources to acquire the extra skills and training they need to be more efficient, more digital and more productive. Thanks to Be the Business, we have made a good start at supporting these firms. Today, the Business Secretary and I are going further with a new set of UK-wide schemes, Help to Grow. First, Help to Grow management will help tens of thousands of small and medium-sized businesses get world-class management training. Dozens of business schools across the UK will offer a new executive development programme with mentoring and peer learning, and government will contribute 90% of the cost. A real commitment to learn more, make more and earn more. Second, Help to Grow digital. With the pandemic, many businesses have moved online. This has been a challenge, but we want to turn it into an opportunity. We're going to help small businesses develop digital skills by giving them free expert training and a 50% discount on new productivity-enhancing software worth up to £5,000 each. Both programmes will commence by the autumn, and I'd urge interested businesses to register today on gov.uk/help to grow. A real commitment to help over 100,000 businesses become more innovative, more competitive, and more profitable. Madam Deputy Speaker, a future economy requires us to be at the forefront of the next scientific and technological revolutions. Becoming a scientific superpower is something we can be. I don't think that's hubristic or unrealistic. Our incredible vaccination programme has shown the world what this country is capable of. So I'm providing an extra £1.6 billion today to continue the rollout and improve our future preparedness. And I want to make the UK the best place in the world for high-growth, innovative companies. So I'm launching 2 wide-ranging consultations today to make sure our research and development tax reliefs and our enterprise management incentives are internationally competitive. And my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, knows that a scientific superpower needs scientific superstars. So together we're announcing ambitious visa reforms aimed at highly skilled migrants, including a new unsponsored points-based visa to attract the best and most promising international talent in science, research and tech, new improved visa processes for scale-ups and entrepreneurs, and radically simplified bureaucracy for high-skill visa applications. Now, as well as support for innovation and access to talent, high-growth firms need access to capital. To do that, we're taking steps to give the pensions industry more flexibility to unlock billions of pounds from pension funds into innovative new ventures, launching a new future fund breakthrough to help fill the scale-up funding gap, and changing the rules to encourage more companies to list here. Let me thank Lord Hill for leading this landmark review. The FCA will be consulting on his proposals very shortly. Madam Deputy Speaker, our future economy depends on remaining a united kingdom. Millions of families and businesses in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland have contributed to and benefited from our coronavirus response. And central to that has been a Treasury that acts for the whole United Kingdom. That's not a political point, it's an undeniable truth. The majority of today's budget measures will apply directly to people in all 4 nations of the United Kingdom. And I'm taking further specific steps with 3 accelerated Scottish city and growth deals in Ayrshire, Argyll and Bute and Falkirk, 3 more in North Wales, Mid Wales and Swansea Bay, and funding for the Holyhead Hydrogen Hub, the Global Centre of Rail Excellence in Neath-Port Talbot, the Aberdeen Energy Transition Zone, as well as the Global Underwater Hub and North Sea Transition Deal, along with the first allocations of the £400 million New Deal for Northern Ireland. And through the Barnett formula, the decisions I'm taking in this budget also increase the funding for the devolved administrations by £1.2 billion in Scotland, £740 million in Wales, and £410 million for the Northern Ireland Executive. And Madam Deputy Speaker, our future economy demands a different economic geography. If we are serious about wanting to level up, that starts with the institutions of economic power. Few institutions are more powerful than the one I am enormously privileged to lead, the Treasury. Along with the other critical economic departments, including BEIS, DIT and MHCLG, we will establish a new economic campus in Darlington. And I know my honourable friend, the member for Darlington, will particularly welcome this announcement. Redrawing our economic map means rebalancing our economic investment. I have already revised the Treasury's Green Book and set out the highest sustained levels of public investment across the UK since the 1970s. But we can go further. I am announcing today over £1 billion for 45 new towns deals. From Castleford to Clay Cross, Rochdale to Rowley Regis, and Whitby to Wolverhampton. And let me pay tribute to local leaders like the brilliant Mayor for the West Midlands, Andy Street, who are making the case for investment in their area. We're also creating a £150 million fund to help communities across the UK take ownership of pubs, theatres, shops, or local sports.
This is a
clubs
lot on
at
the so-called
loss of
levelling
risk of
up
loss,
agenda and
putting more
reallocation
power
of
in
capital
the
to the
hands
regions
of
and different
local
parts
people.
away from London and South
And
East.
I'm launching the first round of the Levelling Up Fund today, inviting applications from local areas across the United Kingdom. And I'm grateful to my right honourable friends, the Transport Secretary and the Community Secretary, for their support on this crucial initiative. Madam Deputy Speaker, I have one final announcement that exemplifies the future economy. A policy on a scale we've never done before. A policy to bring investment, trade, and most importantly, jobs right across this country. To replace the industries of the past with green, innovative, fast-growing new businesses. To encourage free trade and reinforce our position as an outward-looking trading nation open to the world. A policy we can now only pursue now that we are out of the European Union.
Free ports.
Free ports. Free ports are special economic zones with different rules to make it easier and cheaper to do business. They're well established internationally, but we're taking a unique approach. Our free ports will have simpler planning to allow businesses to build, infrastructure funding to improve transport links, cheaper customs with favourable tariffs, VAT or duties, and lower taxes with tax breaks to encourage construction, private investment and job creation. An unprecedented economic boost across the United Kingdom. Free ports will be a truly UK-wide policy, and we will work constructively with the Scottish, Welsh and Northern Irish administrations. Today, I can announce the 8 free port locations in England. East Midlands Airport, Felixstowe and Harwich, Humber, Liverpool City Region, Plymouth, Solent, Thames and Teesside. 8 new free ports in 8 English regions, unlocking billions of pounds of private sector investment, generating trade and jobs up and down the country. I commend members from across the House for their campaigning, but in particular the honourable members for Redcar, Cleethorpes and Great Grimsby, as well as inspiring local leaders like Ben Houchin, the Mayor for Tees Valley. Madam Deputy Speaker, let's take just one of those places, Teesside. In the past, it was known for its success in industries like steel. Now, when I look to the future of Teesside, I see old industrial sites being used to capture and store carbon, vaccines being manufactured, offshore wind turbines creating clean energy for the rest of the country, all located within a free port with a treasury just down the road and the UK Infrastructure Bank only an hour away. I see innovative, fast-growing businesses hiring local people into decent, well-paid green jobs. I see people designing, manufacturing and exporting incredible new products and services. I see people putting down roots in places they are proud to call home. I see a people optimistic and ambitious for their future. That, Madam Deputy Speaker, is the future economy of this country. And so, whilst this last year has been a test unlike any other, that which we are, we are. The fundamentals of our character as a people have not changed. Still determined, still generous, still fair. That's what got us through the last year. It's what will guide us through the next decade and beyond. This time last year, we set out to deliver on the promises we made to the British people. But the most important promise was implicit and in truth is made by every government, irrespective of their politics. And that is to do what must be done when the danger is imminent and when no one else can. Today, we set out a plan to protect the jobs and livelihoods of the British people. But the promises that underpin that plan remain unchanged from those we pledged ourselves to 12 long months ago. To unite and lead, to level up, to create a world-class education system, to keep our streets safe, to keep our NHS strong, to support the most vulnerable, to reform and improve public services, to grow the economy, to spread prosperity, to extend the awesome power of opportunity to all corners of the United Kingdom, and yes, to be honest and fair in all that we do. Madam Deputy Speaker, an important moment is upon us. A moment of challenge and of change. Of difficulties, yes, but of possibilities too. This is a budget that meets that moment, and I commend it to the House.
I'm going to come back in at this point, and I won't let's try and make this do it. So yeah, there we go. I won't play the audio from the response from the opposition. I think we can catch up on that later, but I just wanted to have some initial reaction really to what we just heard. And I think there was so much fear ahead of this budget that we were going to see massive tax rises, that we were going to see a withdrawal of support. But what I think we've just seen and heard there is going to require an awful lot of analysis, because at the face of it, it felt like we weren't being stung with any particular tax rises. But we need to balance that against the notion that the borrowing levels are coming down quite sharply in with those forecasts, and the debt as well. And that stealth tax that he introduced across the board, across many different ways, the freezing of thresholds, don't underestimate that in terms of what that means you'll be paying in additional income tax and other taxes in the coming years. He will be generating an awful lot of tax take as a result of that stealth tax, and it's a hard one for people to get their heads around, because this is about the threshold being maintained. Let me switch back to my full screen, because I think I'm just buffering a little bit. Let's try that. The threshold being maintained, but at the same time, average earnings potentially going up. So more people falling into the higher rates of tax, above the personal allowance, they're falling into 20% rate, and above the higher rate thresholds are falling into the 40% rate as well. So that's significant. The corporation tax, we'd had leaks around that, and I've been saying in previous videos as well, I thought corporation tax would be the first one to go up, because it's only applicable, as Rishi Sunak just said, only applicable to profits. It's tax on profits. So it wouldn't hit the businesses that are really suffering. It would only hit the profitable businesses, and we've still got that scope from 19% where we are all the way, it's going up to 25%, to remain competitive within the G7. So not surprised at all to hear that. But the fact that he won't be increasing corporation tax until 2023, April 2023, and then this super deduction, I love that term. This is the thing, and I saw in the chat a few people saying, corporation tax going up in April 2023 from 19% to 25%. Won't that just encourage companies to wait to spend and invest? Because if they spend and invest when the corporation tax rate's higher, they'll have fewer taxable profits subject to it. So the unintended consequence of putting corporation tax up potentially was business investment stalls, and we don't see money released into the economy over the next couple of years. So it's great to hear about this super deduction, 130% of cost deducted from corporation tax. And I did a big corporation tax deduction myself last summer when I bought my Tesla Model 3. I got 100% deduction, but 130% makes it even more attractive. I think that will drive, and I said it in the chat earlier, I think that will encourage more businesses, limited companies, to go out there and invest in machinery and plant and offices, and probably also, yes, electric vehicles, because while they get 100% at the moment, 130% writing off is quite good. And the corporation tax increase seems to be applied in quite a fair way. I'm not angry about anything I've just heard about in that budget. I have to say, I think the stealth taxes, the freezing of thresholds, I really struggle to get my lips around that. The freezing of thresholds, I think, requires that analysis and will be a significant tax rise over the next few years. But that corporation tax rise seems to be quite well considered. I don't like the idea of paying 25% corporation tax, But smaller businesses, those with profits of under £50,000, still get to pay 19%. They have a small profits rate. And then there's a taper in between £50,000 and £250,000. And again, that's positive. So businesses won't be whacked with 25% corporation tax unless and until they're earning over £250,000 worth of profit. And as Chancellor Rishi Sunak just said, that's only about 10% of companies in the UK in that level. It will create more work for accountants because calculating how much tax you have to pay based on that tapering system is quite complicated. But I think that's all relatively positive. I mean, going back through some of the notes I just put down there, it's interesting that the OBR is now forecasting unemployment peaking at 6.5%. And of course, the Bank of England's forecast, I think, was 7.4, 7.5% peaking this summer. And this is because of the extension of the furlough scheme. And again, this was leaked. We heard about this morning. Furlough now until September, with businesses having to contribute 10% and then 20% for August and September. The business grants, I think, is good news, but as I mentioned, I sort of dips in my audio, the business grants will be subject to rateable property. So this is only going to be available to you as a business if you pay rates on your property. And that £18,000 he talked about for hospitality businesses and personal care businesses, hairdressers, beauty salons, nail bars, that sort of thing, will only be for the highest rateable value properties. I think rateable value over £50,000, something like that. These restart grants, but it didn't sound like there was any discretionary grants within that. So non-rateable value businesses that don't qualify for the restart grant, so that up to £6,000 for non-essential retail when they reopen, up to £18,000 for hospitality and personal care when they reopen. Anything that falls out of that category, out of that qualification criteria, it doesn't sound like there's going to be discretionary grants. Good news that the self-employed will get another round of grants, the Self-Employment Income Support Scheme grants, and then a fifth one, another one after that. But I suspect it was sort of good news, bad news. So good news, there's going to be a fourth and a fifth round. We knew there was going to be a fourth round. That was inevitable. The fifth round is good news. It's in line broadly with the terms of furlough. However, whilst we're bringing some of the newly self-employed in, if they'd completed their tax return by midnight last night, and God, I was harping on at the start of this year, wasn't I? Please get your tax return in, even though it was delayed, I think, until the end of Feb, wasn't it, the self-assessment deadline? Please get in early, because you might not qualify for additional rounds of funding, additional rounds of grants. So whilst that's positive that more newly self-employed people will qualify, not great news that this is now 30% fall in profits being applied. So if you have more than a 30% fall in profits, you qualify for the grant in full. If you have, so that's 80% effectively. If you have less than a 30% fall in profits, then you're restricted to a 30% grant. So, the self-employed are going to have to do some more number crunching, check out their eligibility for that as well. £700 million for arts, culture and sports. It's a big sum, £700 million, but you start spreading it across the theatres and the arts venues and the sporting venues across the UK, that's not going to go very far at all. And then the stamp duty nil rate band, as we expected, extended until the 30th of June, being gradually phased out then until October. The 95% loan-to-value mortgage guarantees that we heard about, fantastic. He talked about turning Generation Rent into Generation Buy, or probably more Generation Rent into Generation Tory, which is why, of course, the Conservative government like to prop up the property market and get people onto the property ladder because they're more likely to vote Conservative in the future. That's not going to be for everyone. Whilst it doesn't sound like there's going to be restrictions for first-time buyers or people buying new-build properties, with a 5% deposit, you could be moving up, etc. That's great, but you are still going to need a fairly clean credit rating to take advantage of that. This is not going to be open to everybody, and of course it's definitely not going to be open for the millions of people on furlough or who are unemployed, because banks are going to still require earnings history, are still going to need to have evidence that you can afford to maintain it. This freezing of thresholds, this stealth tax, I think we have to do the number crunching on it, but it's applied to income tax rates, it's applied to inheritance tax nil rate band, the pension lifetime allowance. And of course, with pension funds, they're growing at a rate typically faster than average earnings. So that really is a big stealth tax there as well. I've talked about the corporation tax increase, the super deductions. The UK Infrastructure Bank, £12 billion, creating £40 billion of lending for infrastructure. This is about this build back better, build back greener agenda. But there was a bit of and we noticed this in a chat, there was a bit of a sort of a paradox there, which is freezing the fuel duty increase. whilst talking about a green agenda at the same time. Which are you doing? Pick and choose, Mr. Sunak. Do you want to encourage people to stop driving petrol and diesel cars and stop polluting, or do you want to invest in the green future and green jobs? The retail savings bond, green bond, first available retail savings green bond, sovereign debt bond for retail investors in the world. So that's a world first as well. And then this help to grow scheme, which businesses can register for now ahead of it being launched in the summer. But it sounds like that's just for very small businesses, a few of them 5 employees, I think, on that one. But details of that to come soon. I don't think anything in there particularly shocked me. I think some of it was actually quite well considered. For a nice change. I was expecting worse. I was really bracing myself for some quite nasty tax rises. That's not to say they're not coming. Whilst a lot of what was announced by Rishi Sunak just now was setting the scene for the next couple of years, I suspect we are going to have another financial statement, another budget in the autumn, say November time, and depending on the state of the economic recovery at that stage, he may feel he can go a bit further, and he can look at things like capital gains tax and inheritance tax. He made a commitment today. He's not going to increase the rates of income tax or national insurance for the life of this government, this parliament, and that's really positive. We can have some positive things there. Parter just asked a question. For limited companies, have they announced an additional loan support scheme? They did, and I was busy on the chat and not making notes at the point they did that. But what I'm going to do immediately after this YouTube live is I go away and I write up a briefing note about the budget, all the key points you need to consider in one PDF. That will be available on the Informed Choice website later this afternoon at icfp.co.uk. You can download it for free. It'll be 10 to 12 pages, just a summary of what was covered and a bit of analysis as well. I'll also be making more videos over the next couple of days, hopefully a bit later today on this. And also later tonight, 8 o'clock tonight, if you're a member of Clubhouse, come and find me on Clubhouse. I'll be there with the UK Money Bloggers podcasting community talking about the budget. And I'm also doing a podcast interview at 6 o'clock tonight with Hannah Godfrey, who's my co-host for Informed Choice Radio, Talking Money, and it's a budget reaction one. And then the other time today to look out for, I'm working my way backwards here, so 8 o'clock Clubhouse, 6 o'clock podcast recording. Please look out for 5 o'clock this evening. Rishi Sunak is delivering the Downing Street press briefing, so he'll be explaining what he just revealed in the budget in a far more user-friendly, consumer-friendly way, and putting all of that into context. But I think that went okay for our first YouTube live. Thank you so much for everyone that's joined me, for everyone who shared comments as well. Please do press the like button. It helps us so much with this YouTube algorithm and helping other people find my videos and find my content on here. A huge thank you to everyone who subscribed. We crossed over 2,000 subscribers just a couple of days ago, which was to challenge my nephew Barnaby set for me, and he's now challenged me earlier in the chat to get to over 3,000 by the end of March. I'm not sure that's quite possible. I'll give it a good go. But a huge thank you to everyone who's taken part in this live today. I'll be doing more of these in the future. Please do press like, please press subscribe as well and become a subscriber. Huge thank you. Thank you for watching. Until next time, I'm Martin Bamford, and when it comes to your money, the more you know, the faster it can grow. Thanks for watching. I'm going to find out how to stop the stream now. It's here somewhere.